Hi, this is Dan Henk. Welcome to another edition of the Skull Sessions. And today my guest is BL Blankenship. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. Good, good. I actually nailed it. All right. Um, so what's up, dude?
A whole lot. So in 2024, I really got active in trying to get out there writing like comic books and getting them published. So I've been dealing with a bunch of that. I've got some stuff that's going to wind up in like Q3, Q4 of this year, one of which is like a very horror-based comic that ties into my literary world and all that. Besides all of that, I believe we were going to talk about how I'm going to be included in the anthology Tumble Bleed, which I'm super excited about. A lot of great authors there. I love Merrill, just all the people that are involved with that. So I mean, that's awesome. The horror community's been good to me. I put up my first fiction book in 2020, and
Okay.
there's
What
quite
is
a
it
few.
called?
God Walks the Dark Hills, volume book one and two.
Okay, is that
So it
still
was a dual
available?
novel. Oh yeah, it's on Amazon. It's everywhere. Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, whatnot. I say this like for author speak for all the
Everywhere
author
fine books is
people.
sold.
Yes, it's published through Ingram Spark, and the reason that I've found that desirable to do is because it kind of casts a net, and it doesn't just have it in one place, but all over. So, I mean, I get book sales in Europe and whatnot. People really like Westerns in Europe. I don't know if you know that or not, but they do. They're popular. Um, I've
Yeah,
never
probably
really hit
because
Asia.
it's considered more of like a U.S. thing, so it's like it's new to them.
I don't know. That it's a very U.S. thing. The cowboy, that's American, wild and free.
Right,
But
right.
but yeah, when I determined that I was going to write some fiction stuff, I just thought, what do I like? And I like westerns and I like horror. And when you mention Western horror, there's a lot of people that act like it's this thing they've never heard of it, like it doesn't exist. There's a lot, and I mean like a lot, and I've detailed a bunch of that. So in Western horror, within literature, Joe Lansdale. If you ask people who's the king of Western horror, they're going to tell you Joe Lansdale. He's written a good deal of it, but he's also like higher up, as far as like an author and sales and being a big deal. I mean, he wrote episodes of Batman the animated series. He's written for major comic book companies. He has as publishers pursue him. So he's a big deal guy, lives in Texas. A super nice guy too, Joe
Yeah, no,
Lansdale.
I saw him at the last Dallas Con, and he was awesome.
Yeah. I was referred to myself. Maybe it stuck. I think it did. Is the Western horror aficionado. So I wasn't saying I'm the king when clearly I'm not. But it's like I'm the know-it-all. You deep dive. I mean, that's really what you do to get into anything like that. You ask questions and whatnot, and you get on and you just let people know, like, here's all these movies that are made that are in this time frame. There's a lot of them. There was some dude that was on Twitter because that's where people go to complain like they're in middle school, and they were going wild about Brimstone. Brimstone, and I totally defend it. The author's super nice. Martin, he's been like real nice to me. He's read my stuff for consideration of making a film out of. Nothing's happened with that yet, but I did send my stuff to Austria, and it was cool of him. He made the movie Brimstone. It has Dakota Fanning in it. It's a good cast. It is a gory, rough, hard, nasty Western horror that I absolutely love. The dad is a James Bond villain looking psychopath preacher who wants to marry his daughter, take that exactly like it's meant, and he will not stop coming after her like he's Michael Myers or something.
What
It's
year did that
awesome.
come out?
Oh man, I don't remember. It was a few years ago. So there's a scene where she thinks that she kills them in a burning whorehouse that she's fled to and becomes a prostitute. So there's some nudity in it. There's language. It's rated R. So she thinks that maybe he's dead. He's not. She had this friend that because she had fought back against a man that was beating her, had her tongue cut out, and she was going to get away from the prostitution and get married to some guy that just wanted a good wife, cook, clean, have babies, trad wife is what they call that now. And the friend dies. She gets killed in like the fight fire thing and all that. And so Dakota Fanning wanting to take her place, she gets her tongue cut out. She has somebody cut her tongue off so she can pass this other woman who the man's not seen. He just knows she's a mute. And long
Oh, so
story
she
short, without
intentionally has her tongue cut out.
yeah, because she's that desperate to get away from that place. And long story short, without like spoiling the end of the movie, he finds her. So she's living this life under a false identity. She's
Right,
had her tongue cut out.
right,
She's went through this nightmare of life. It shows it. The scenes aren't in chronological order, which that's kind of Tarantino-esque, but they're
right,
not in
right. I'm thinking
chronological
Pulp
order.
Fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, it starts out like really soft. Like there's no nothing in it. There's no nothing that would make it rated R at all. And then I'm not going to say what happens, but the dial gets turned up.
But overall,
It
it's good.
progressively goes darker. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. A lot of people say Blood Tomahawk. Blood Tomahawk was
Bone
obviously like a
Tomahawk.
bigger, or Bone Tomahawk. I'm sorry. It was
Awesome
a
movie, by the way.
yeah, it was like way more mainstream than this. I like it. It has the darkness to it. You're making women into paraplegics so they can have babies of Neanderthal Indians. Okay, but I like this movie better.
Well, they also scalp a person alive and cut them in half. So, I mean,
Oh
there
yeah,
is
there's
that.
there's a few movies where they do that. They do that in Mohawk. They have you seen Prey recently? By the way, the Predator movie that's like
Oh, was
set
it
in
good?
the
I didn't see it.
I liked it. I liked it, and they do have a woman in it that she's kind of like the tough girl character and all that, but it's done well. He lets her live because he underestimates her because she's a woman. What's she gonna do? And so I mean, he's like it's like insulting
Yeah,
to her because
when
she's
they,
really
I
tough.
don't like when they include a character just for, like points, but when they include a character that's like part of a really good
Yeah,
story, it's awesome.
it was awesome.
Like Ridley and Alien or Sandra
Yeah.
Connor and in Terminator,
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. But no, I liked it a lot. Watched that recently. I like the keeping room. That's a good one. You have these two with three women. One of them's a slave. And it's the American Civil War is going on. And so the dynamic of that, in a lot of books that I've written, I've utilized that dynamic because I tend to like have the underdog as the main character, which
Right.
would be the South, because the Union
Well,
Army is
I
much
always
larger.
assume that, but that might
Yeah,
just be me.
the Union Army is well, I mean, not as far as competence, but as far as size. The
Mhm.
Union Army was vastly bigger. They were the ones that were invading the South. The men were fighting to defend it. So you have these women that are in the keeping room, and all the guys are gone. They're fighting, protecting the South against the invading, Union hordes. And so there's these things called bummers. It's a real thing, and that was basically like the terrorist cell groups of the Union. The South had bushwhackers, which was kind of like you don't really leave your home. You're just kind of going around and doing saboteur type stuff and attacking people, and you're out in the woods. So you're on your home base and all that. So that's what the South had, that was like their rogue element. The North had bummers, and it's these guys, and they go raping, killing, all that, and find these three women and terrorize them. So it's a good movie. So it's these three, Southern women, and these like I think it's two guys. It might be like three or whatever, but they're terrorizing them and they're coming to get them. So it's home invasion, but it's set back then. The Wind is a good movie. The Wind is more like pioneer horror, but I still throw that in with Western horror. It's in Kansas. I've traveled the United States. In Kansas, it feels like the wind never stops blowing, and I hate that on a personal level. It gets really cold too, and that's where a lot of old West stuff was because that's where Boot Hill and all that is. I don't know if people like know that, but I mean, I just think how miserable that must have been because the winters are really stupid cold, and it does snow and get cold in Texas too, by the way. I
And that's
like
before indoor heating and all that stuff. Yeah.
oh yeah. Yeah, I like the oh what's it called? Is it the not the mockingbird, the nightingale. I like the nightingale a lot. That's in Australia, and there's this woman, and she's Irish, which in history, Irish were considered the trash of all white people. So you've got the evil redcoat British people, and they decide they want to have sex with her and don't kill to kill her man and her baby. So they kill her husband and beat her baby's brains out, and she wants revenge, and so she goes trying to hunt them down. And there's this Aborigines guy, the native black guys of Australia, and she gets him as her guide, and she says, "Don't you see?" And they become good friends. She says, "Don't you see? They see us as the same." And like the baddest scene on the planet is where he's like wiping like the white chalk stuff on him, and he's sharpening a stick, and you know that it's just on. Somebody does get gut stabbed with a pointy stick spear. It's great. He goes into like full on native mode, tribal on the red coat guy, which you know in
What is
America you
it?
got
What's
to
the name of the movie?
the nightingale.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good. There's a lot of
But
Western
these are
movies like
all
that.
like movies that inspired you, that like push you towards Western horror genre.
I don't know. I've just liked it in general. So you know, when I wrote my my novella, and there's a lot of extreme horror splatterpunk people that like it. So here's the deal with this. When I wrote The Confederado, a Western horror tale of Mesoamerican gore, that's the full name of it. Resident Evil: The Village and Diablo were largely inspirational on that because I thought I just want some kind of slugfest, gore fest, smut fest, awful video game-esque type of, just gratuitous type book. It was me pushing the envelope because I hate to be marginalized and put in a box. So the character's not a redemptive character. So I read Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, which I absolutely love. And
Yeah, I
that
have it
is
on my shelf. Well, like probably about 30 pages into it.
what was inspirational to me about that, because I'm really loquacious anyway. That means you use a lot of words. You know, there's an art form
I think
to
if
be.
you don't know what loquation means, you don't know. If you use a lot of words, people aren't going to understand.
Yeah,
So,
so I think that there's an art form to overly describing something in the way that it's poetic, and if you're not doing it that way, then it's just shut up and say less words. But there's a way to like you, and so I would write these big long descriptive things, but I would write them in a way where it sounds like you're grinding your teeth and you're just sick to death of the world. It rains through the entire book because I thought I want it to be as miserable as possible. um there's these two witches. They're both insanely hot, and he has sexual relations with both of them because I thought, what's something that this character can do that was like taboo, like against the Bible. And so he's with the mother and the daughter, hooking up with them both, and they drug him. And of course, I'm always you get the internet, so I'm like doing research, and it's like, what kind of drug could they have gave him? It's in Oaxaca, Mexico, and the reason for that is because I like the terrain. So there's like the rainforest and cloud forests and all that. The only thing that anybody listening, unless they for some weird reason know about Oaxaca, is there's a cheese named that's from there. Um,
well,
but it has an
I've been to
X.
the, I think it was called the Cloud Mountain It was in
Mhm.
Costa Rica. Like I don't know if that's a continuation of like the because I mean a lot of that stuff like goes to a number of countries like the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah, but it's got cool stuff in it. There's a necromancer in it. There's all kinds of stuff. There's things in it that where they're doing ceremonial magic and like the harshest scene that's in there that I'm not going to go into the description describing in the video, but it's written in a way that's just awful and vile. And the main witch has a man and a child and a pig, and it involves a lot of feces and blood and sex magic and a seashell dagger or a knife and all kinds of stuff like that. There's craziness that goes on in it, but it's just about how like bad and evil this place is. I would write like God Walks the Dark Hills and stuff like that, and there was always this glimmer of hope and good. And I thought, what if there was this place that I wrote about. And I thought, let me like make it not in America. Let me make it somewhere foreign because that's what they said that the brilliance of The Exorcist was, that they got this foreign, God thing is the demon. And because it's foreign, because it's strange to people, it freaks them out. Because it's I don't know you, stranger danger. And I thought, what if there was this place and it almost has this vibe, like it's in the shadow of this mountain, and it's just like it's this place where if God's there, you would have no idea that it's just so dark and it's so dismal, and you just don't have any hope. And so, I mean, that's the environment that you have. It's got a very Amazonian. I say that like in Greek mythology, like all female, man hating, cannibalistic, natives. And so they're in it. They have this Goliath of a character who is, it's the only, male, more male than female, but a hermaphrodite. And that's the reason why but not just that, but like deformed beyond that. So I have scoliosis, but I have him with the really severe scoliosis, and he's got like a slanted forehead and like the underbite and slobbering all over and just and all kinds of stuff. But I mean everything in it's as ill as can be. The main witch, her son, is largely based on Grendel from Beowulf, and I thought, what can I have him be like for deformed? And I thought, what if he had like no chin, perpetually? Which I mean, there's a medical thing with that, but he's kind of got like
Yeah,
the
no, there
fish
are people
mouth
born with
drooping.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought he needs something like odd about him, but he's in his mind he's very slow-witted, but he's basically he's kind of invincible. He's like crazy, stupid, strong. So you've got that. So the guy has to contend with something that he can't like fight off. But no, there's a bunch of stuff. I had written
So
a book
is
that I
that
go ahead.
that's your latest book? What you were just
No,
talking about?
no, no. My latest nonfiction book that I had ever put out isn't Western horror. All of these other ones were. It was set in 1972, and I love it. It's a novel. It was one of these things. There's this ease to when you don't feel like you have to write a novel or novella per se, but you just sit down to write it, and it's going to be whichever one it turns out being, and the name of it is Holy Ghost Exorcist. And I wish that like Netflix or Amazon would pick it up for a series because so many exorcism things. I mean, I study all the demonology, theological preacher stuff, yada yada yada. They do such an inadequate job on stuff. So I made it based a ton of it off real life ministries about a guy he's a real mild mannered preacher. He's not like a prima donna or anything like you get on TV. But he works at a J.C. Penney selling shoes, and he pastors a small church. And God leads him to be in deliverance ministry. And the opposition that he gets is from other religious people in his denomination, which that's typical, honestly. But no, it's a good thing. So he's casting devils out of people, and all that, and somebody gets mad and says they're going to leave his church that's been there for years, and you know, and it's heartbreaking to the character, and he has to contend with all kinds of stuff like that. It has some really dark twists in it, but I really liked writing it. I think it's a masterpiece. I wish people would like cover it. Um, it is my fiction book that I feel like is my best fiction book, but it's not some like gore fest. It's very Southern Gothic. It's more of a drama than anything else, but it totally has horror tones in various scenes and everything. But he's
What's the name of this book?
Holy Ghost Exorcist.
Okay, and
And
it's
and this
available everywhere.
yeah, it's everywhere. It's in all the play. If you went on Amazon and looked at my stuff, you would see all of my books in there, like period. You would see Abraham Lincoln Burns in Hell, which is totally different than anything else. It's a serial. They're novelettes. It's like a collection of newspaper clippings and different stuff. That's about John Wilkes Booth traveling interdimensionally to assassinate different tyrannical variants of Abraham Lincoln on alternate worlds, because it's almost like Doctor Who. As kids love that, by the way. I when I did that, I thought, what's something cheeky and stupid that I can do? It's like, what's the worst ideal that I could possibly do? And people just think it's absolutely hilarious that you have a plot
Oh,
where John
that sounds
Booth
pretty
is
cool to me.
yeah
Like
yeah
John Wilkes Booth traveling
yeah
interdimensionally, fighting like
yeah
tyrannical incarnations of
Lincoln yeah.
yeah.
So ideally, let's say it was a show, okay? So it's like Sliders, and he goes to the next world, and the objective is always the same: kill Lincoln. That's it. But there's twists because the world is going to be different. It's not going to be like here. It's an alternate Earth, but the objective is kill Lincoln. There's three of those. The first one is a steampunk world. The second one, and I have things that I thought what could happen that would make this happen. And so for the steampunk one, it became a standstill in the war. France and all intervened, and so there was just kind of like a peace treaty. The North was actually closer to Germany anyway. So the North were, you know, Germany did have technological advances. Of course, I'm thinking like World War II type stuff. So they start getting airships. They've got the blimps. They get more and more steampunk. The North does. Of course, what would have happened in real life if the South won is that France would have likely won Mexico because they were fighting trying to take over Mexico. Napoleon III was. So that happens. There wouldn't have been a Boshin War because the United States intervention in that, along with other countries, was what forced Japan to have to interact with everybody else and unify under an emperor, i.e., their Lincoln, instead of being like feudal states under the shogunate. It was like a confederacy of states, like the South, the different parts of Japan were, and they wanted one guy that was like, I would rather kill you all than not have you unite under my flag. And so it was like Lincoln in that way. But their thing was that they didn't want to deal with outsiders and foreigners. That was their debate. It was when I don't want to go into like a big spiel about that, but it would have been bad economically if the South would have broke apart, because then you would have had a rival, you know, nation there that was really industrious. But yeah, it's a ton of stuff that there is in history, and I've studied it like way too much, and I studied Lincoln like way too much. And when you read older stuff, and that's really what studying history is, it's reading from that time period and not like 15 years down the road, because people change things. You know, he was made a martyr. That's why you've got the Democratic and the Republican Party that both like put him up on there. But what he did was he bent the rules of government to do what he wanted to do. He was a great speaker. I probably would have wanted him as a lawyer to represent me in court. but he had a lot of different things that people that personally knew him would say about him. You had a man that wrote in a book that the only time that Abraham Lincoln ever went to church was to make fun of it. So you've got that. You've got him having seances in the White House. There's a book about the romantic life of Abraham Lincoln that heavily just goes into that he was a homosexual. You get all kinds of stuff, and I only mention those, and that's not like throwing a rock here or throwing a rock over there. It's just that's not the way he's painted.
Right. Would
But
you say overall that he was a good figure in history, or do you think that he was like a very questionable figure in history?
man, I think he was really hard nosed, and that he didn't want to see the South secede. And I, and it would, you'd have to imagine what the world would have been like if that would have happened. They had books out that it was quote unquote reasons with an S for the American Civil War, but that's become more propaganda to the point where people like they're going to have a brain hemorrhage wants to say that it was only about slavery. But if you read any of the stuff that the people had there, it'd be like, well, it wasn't about that at all. If you
But
read the
I've gotten in
Emancipation,
big arguments with people because, yeah, slavery was a component, but a large component was also, you don't tell me what to do. Like,
it, it,
we're independent states. We're not like, like a empire under a tyrant. So I know. So, and I've had people that are like, no, it was all about slavery. I was like,
it
well,
wasn't.
some of it was, but that was not all. A lot of people couldn't even afford slaves.
I mean, do you think that the rich slave owners, quote unquote, were the ones that were fighting in the battlefield? No, it's no, of course not. So
No,
if you look at
they were drafting people, and then
yeah,
they were
oh
raiding their
man,
wife and daughters' homes,
the
for
the
supplies.
the riots that they had in New York, hanging black people, saying if this war's about black people, that we would rather side with the South. I mean, you had Grant say if it was to free the slaves that he would give his sword to the South. He owned a slave. General Robert E. Lee, who I'm related to, by the way, but General Robert E. Lee, he illegally taught his slaves how to read. You weren't supposed to do that. And because that would, so you could keep them in bondage. Why would you teach them how to read? That would be if you wanted them to be like everybody else. So Lee, he did that. He and his wife, who's the granddaughter of George Washington. And meanwhile, Grant had a slave. So if you read the Emancipation Proclamation, if anybody cares about history, do that. How many slaves did it free? Not one, zero. What it basically said is it basically said that all the slaves are free quite literally everywhere that we do not have the power to do this, but every little place that we planted our flag, that we have power over, down in New Orleans and everything where our armies have taken over, where we could free the slaves, we're not doing it. And it more so
Did it
said,
say
it gave it.
if I remember correctly? Did it say like everywhere that's in war with us, their slaves are freed, but we're not talking about the people that ally with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was if you just drop it right now, you can keep your slaves forever. Because it was about power and control. It wasn't about the whole slavery thing. In fact, Lincoln was raising money. You can look at how they were colonizing Liberia because he wanted to make America into a white utopia. And there's a book on that by a black historian, a black man. It's what was it called? I think it's like Forced into Glory or something. And then the second part of the name is Abraham Lincoln's White American Dream. So there's a book about that, about how Lincoln he wasn't wanting black people in slavery. He was wanting a white utopia because anytime that you would mention, you know, it's like, but what are you going to do if you're going to free the slaves? Are you going to breed with them? And it would turn into that. It's like we've got to get these black people, that may not have been the word that was used, but
Well,
we've got to get
I
them
think
out
he
of
wanted to
here.
like bring him back to Africa or something, you know.
Yeah, and not here. Basically, yes, not in the United States. It was send them off to an island somewhere, send them to Africa, and you even had people that would make the absurd statements during that time that we did them a favor. We've taught them about culture and religion and all that. You know, really, when you're not educating somebody, which I could go all into how the education system is kind of messed up. But
I
if
agree,
you're not
yeah.
if you're not teaching somebody how to read, you're not helping them. You're keeping them in bondage because then they can't grow and progress.
No, well, my parents are military, and one thing they did is they always put me in the private schools that they could afford, which weren't that good because I mean they're military, they didn't make that much. But
What
still,
branch?
my dad was Army.
Mhm.
He was in every war from Vietnam all the way through the first Gulf War.
Man,
And
my
they paid for him to get a doctorate, so he has a doctorate in anthropology and
that's
a
awesome.
specialization in African affairs.
Mhm.
Like my grandparents are missionaries
Mhm.
in Zimbabwe, so he grew up there. So he speaks Swahili fluently, speaks French fluently, and of course he speaks English
That's
fluently.
awesome. Um, my son had just enlisted a while ago, so he's actually he's in the Navy, and so he went up to Chicago. You know, it's right over by there where the base is to go through basic, and then he went down to San Antonio, and he's going over to Meridian, Mississippi soon, and I'm gonna go visit him, and then later after that he'll go up to their Connecticut base for some more training and everything. Connecticut is sub school.
Right. Yeah, my
So
dad
yeah,
went to West Point, he went to the Citadel, and then he got his doctorate from the University of Florida.
that's awesome. That is so cool, man. I love that. Yeah, I love the past. It's amazing. I would at God Walks the Dark Hills, I would study the battles because I don't want things to happen without consequence. And I think, who can they go around and travel with? And so I'd have them, going alongside in a militia, the main characters with certain people. And then so this battle's going to happen and that one's going to happen. So I wanted real history like tied in. Like if it rained
Yeah,
on
I
this
think a
day,
lot
I
of
would do that.
people they're ignorant of history, period.
Yeah.
So like it's things are a lot more complex and there are a lot more gray areas than people think.
What I thought was neat that I have never written anything about that I thought would just be the coolest story. I think his name was Rathbone. I might be wrong on that, but the dude that was in the balcony with Abraham Lincoln when Booth went in to assassinate him, that like messed up his leg and caused him to like fall and like break it. Um, it was fighting. So there was this friend that got there with his date who he married, and he perpetually had a mental breakdown for the rest of his life. So his wife was like, "This makes him so nuts every time it's this time of year when Lincoln got assassinated. We've got to get out of DC." So they moved to England. I forget how many years later it was, but it's in the papers. You can go on the Library of Congress's website and find that. That's loc.gov, Library of Congress. I love it. It's like candy to me. So anyway, you can find this guy and you can read about it. So what happens is years later, he's having this psychotic breakdown, worse and worse every year about the Lincoln thing and Booth killing him. And I wish there was something that I could have did. Um, he goes and murders their children and his wife with a knife, and then he is taken to Bedlam, the mental institution, the famous one, where he dies.
He
I mean,
murders
it's
John Wilkes Booth's wife and
no, no,
kids.
he murders his spouse and his
Wow,
own children in
wow.
England because he's just like bat crap crazy nuts. And I'm like, you just can't even make this stuff up. and it's all because he was in the booth, supposedly.
So
When
this actually happened. It's not a
oh
fictional
no,
account.
it really happened. No, there's so
Wow.
much stuff that's documented around that, but it's in newspapers, and I stumbled upon it when I was doing all my Lincoln Booth research because I'm writing the book about Booth doing this. There's a book, by the way, that has like the letters of John Wilkes Booth. Um, I have him way more flowery and poetic than he actually was. As a writer, anyway, he probably spoke well, but like writing, he didn't come off as hot.
Well, yeah, I
He had
think a
his
lot of people in those days were like not nearly as like socially aware and literate as
yeah
most people are. Well, I don't know. Public schools are getting so bad, but
yeah.
for a while there, it seemed like people were like a lot more literate.
Do you know that Booth was Lincoln's favorite actor?
No,
Because
that's hysterical.
he invited him to the White House, and Booth made a racial statement. I think it was about he'd rather shake a black person's hand or something like that. So I'd have been asked about the Booth thing. Was he the good guy? It's like no, no. He really wasn't. But it's I thought for the concept of it, I thought it would be cool if because you have all this other dimension stuff that Marvel and everybody does. It's like, what if on some other world somebody viewed John Wilkes Booth as the hero, and all these other planets had a Lincoln problem, and if we could just have him transport from one world to the other. And by the way, when I have him transport, just so you know, so you've got a
Well, it's
visual
kind of a
of
cool
how I
twist,
had it.
yeah.
Yeah, the way that I have him transport, he kind of appears and disappears like the way that the Wicked Witch of the West did and the Wizard of Oz, because I like the overwhelming plume of smoke. That's just like so much more old school. Not going through a portal, just like a boom, and then there he is, and that's more grandiose and just like old school than
But
that. But
he
no,
doesn't melt with water, right? I'm
no, no, not
melting. I'm
not
melting.
nothing like that. But he always has to concoct how he's going to get Lincoln. And the second one, the United States has become a papal state. I had the Catholic Church, who actually the South got a letter from and said they're on our side. But there's a big back and forth about that. You did have churches that were blessing everybody's weapons, yeah, depending on, in the states that they were in. But you basically have Lincoln, and he's using the religious thing to manipulate. So he's kind of like the Pope of America, essentially in it. That's so old school. Like the Caesars did that. Why am I the
Well, I
leader?
think
Because God ordained it.
I
Argue
think
with that.
for the Western horror for Tumble Bleed, because I mainly do cosmic horror, like Lovecraft
Mhm.
type stuff,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, I love it.
so I figured, I don't want to be, called. I hate when people like write stuff in like people that actually know their shit is like that's fucking bullshit. So I was like, for Western horror, I'm gonna do a bunch of research. So like everything from like watching magazines to reading books to all that sort of stuff. And there's actually a lot of stuff that I didn't know. Like there were more Indians that fought for the Confederacy than fought for the Union.
Yeah, but there were a bunch for both. I had it seems like I had something where I had mentioned somebody being a Pawnee scum. So the Pawnee Indians were used, they were good trackers, as traders to the other Native Americans, and they would help the Union soldiers to track down other tribes so they could slaughter them. An amazing real life book, and it's a narrative, and it's from the Native American point of view, is Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. That's the name of it. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. And it talks about there's also an audiobook if you're on Audible, of it. And it talks about all the travesties that happened against Native Americans. It's amazing. I mean, it is it makes me love Sitting Bull that much more. It's really violent stuff. It talks about how the American soldiers, like hating on the Indians, did the genital mutilation to them, cut off the guy's balls and stick them in his mouth. Is that
Oh,
specifically?
really? Wow.
Yeah, and so what happened was the Native Americans, these tribes, they found out about it. So then they went ahead and they did that to the American troops that they beat. But then you know how newspapers run with it. They ran with it, and it's like these bunch of savages. Look at what they did, but they don't
Right.
say
Even though it was
this is
started
what
by
we did.
somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget what that website is called. I think it's Grounded or something. I've heard some YouTuber talking about it, but it's a there's a news website and there's probably other ones like this, but it doesn't just give you the news, but it like talks about like left and right wing sources, and it's like here's what this one's pushing more, here's what this one's pushing left. Here's an article about the same thing, and this is what this one called it and their angle, and
I
what
feel
this
like
one
you
did.
can barely trust anyone.
Yeah,
Like I'm mostly libertarian. It's like
yeah.
they all suck.
No,
You
I hear
know,
you. I agree.
right
Yeah,
wing, left wing.
it's
I
it's
have to
like a
listen to like five different accounts of the same incident to go, okay, let me try and figure out what happened because I have whole different takes by different people.
yeah. I want the government to leave me alone unless I need them. I don't trust the FDA. Do you know that like stuff that we have in our food here in America that's okay to have in our food that basically will give you cancer or
Oh, of
whatever?
course, yeah.
They don't even have that in other countries because it'll
Yeah,
kill you.
my mom is big on that. Like she's
Yeah,
always been big on that stuff. Like as a little kid, we'd have to eat we'd have brown rice. We'd have like whole grain bread. Like she was always we used to eat vitamins and like at the time they're all like horse pills. So
yeah.
we'd take all these vitamins. So yeah, no, I'm actually pretty familiar with that.